Now joining me on the news to discuss this further is rights activist Asan Taiwo Soweto. He is the National Coordinator, Education Rights Campaign. Thank you for your time, Asan. Now, let me start by first asking, this strike action, I mean, we are seeing a more, I call it a compassing involvement, involving not just the TUC and the NLC this time making an announcement, but we are seeing solidarity, I call it coordination or support from other sister unions. What do you make of this particular development? And do you see a scenario where it would happen and if at all be effective?
What that development shows is that the leadership of the NSC and the TUC are not acting alone when they say that the government is not offering anything that can ensure that workers have a better life and that a strike has become the necessary logical step of action. That is what the kind of response you have seen from affiliate unions since Friday demonstrate. It shows that if the government allows the strike to take off tomorrow, there's a likelihood there's going to be a solid strike that's going to shut down the entire country. This is because the minimum wage issue is an issue that concerns every member of the labor union. Because we all know that given the inflation, the 30,000 minimum wage is no more adequate to support any basic existence. So that the ball is now in the court of the government to see what can be done to ensure that the demands are met. Otherwise, Nigeria may be shut down starting from tomorrow.
Now, let's also consider the impact of this particular action. We are seeing from across sector, from the oil and gas to education to health, even the judiciary. How much of an impact do you emphasize, if at all this happening, this would have on Nigeria's economy and also in terms of, compelling the government to respond?
Obviously, it's going to affect productivity because workers obviously are the engine room of production. But we must also be very clear that there is no impact of the strike negatively that can be comparable, to the destruction, of the economy that the policies, the very policies of this government, has created over the past 1 year. So from that point of view, whatever impact the strike will have from tomorrow on the economy is actually a corrective impact to compel the government to begin to listen to the demands. And of course, when you talk about whether this can make the government to listen, it's very obvious, unless they want the entire country, to be destroyed. A strike, a general strike, like what labor unions are planning now, is not something, that any serious government should allow, to go on for far too long. So I believe that this can compel the government, to listen and find a way to resolve the problem. But if they don't, then obviously the labor unions will have to decide on the next steps.
All right. Now, let's also look at the demands of labor. How realistic is this demands? I mean, initially it was over 600,000, and then, of course, they shifted grounds to about 400,000 naira plus. And right now, the last, in terms of negotiation, the figures the government and organized private sector were proposing is 60,000 naira, which broke down, and hence we are at this particular juncture. How realistic is the demands of labor vis-a-vis the concerns of certain economic experts, saying that if at all the government raises the minimum wage to, say, 400,000, that would cause inflation?
Well, I will call those people voodoo economists because they don't know what they are saying. Because over the past 24 years, we have seen the salary of political office holders go up, by several thousand%, and it has not caused inflation. We have seen the salaries of CEOs, and MDs and directors at different levels, of the society go up, and that has not caused inflation. But they are saying that workers' wages will cause inflation. This is voodoo economies. It's an attempt to try and blackmail workers. Indeed, if you look at the proposals of the NSC and TUC, you will realize that it's not something that they just picked, from thin air. They showed very clearly the component of those figures they are putting forward in terms of transportation, in terms of accommodation, in terms of food and service. So that these are things that can be verified even by average Nigerians. But you need to ask yourself, The 60,000 that the federal government and the organized private sector has put forward, what are the components of that 60,000 naira? How much is for transportation? How much is for accommodation? How much is for food? And that's how you then realize that what is actually not practicable is the figure being put forward by the government and the organized private sector. The truth is that if we run an economy that is devoted to making life better for the vast majority, then a minimum wage of 400 plus thousand should not be too difficult for a government to provide. What is behind all of this crisis is because we run a capitalist economy that is, and society that is not interested in providing the best of life for the vast majority. Rather, is only interested in enriching a few. And that is what we need to correct. We need to end the system of capitalism with a socialist reconstruction of Nigeria by putting Nigeria's wealth under democratic workers' control. A living wage should be possible, not just a minimum wage. A living wage ought to be possible in Nigeria.
All right. Now, talking about living wage, let's look at it also from the angle of sustainability on the part of the state governments to be able to meet up, and also private sector and business owners, because we know that over time what has been noticed is once an increment is announced in terms of earnings, particularly for those in the organized labor and all of that, you often see that the price of things also in the market goes up. So how sustainable do you think this will be for states in terms of their capacity to pay, and even private businesses and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, for the states, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see any problem there, especially if the federal government is prepared for this to succeed. We have seen that when it comes to things that are interested, it's not difficult for them to get a consensus at federal and state level for things to be done. It's only when it gets to workers' welfare, that's why you can have a situation whereby some states would say that they cannot afford it. So if the federal government is actually interested, because what you have to ask yourself is that what is the benefit of having a political party, in power, if there cannot be, a united approach to governance by all of the members of that party in power? The APC today is the ruling party. So that if it's actually interested in providing a better welfare for workers, and at the federal level it agrees to a particular figure for minimum wage, then it should not be too difficult to convince all its members across the 30 states, where they are holding power, at least to set an example for others. The other point to make is this: for the private sector, we must be very clear that it's not workers' wage, it's not the minimum wage, that will create problem for them or that will make them to go under. Prior to now, since May 29, several multinational companies are folded up in this country. And that's not because of any minimum wage. It is because of the neoliberal policies of this government, which is anti-growth and anti-productivity. And that is what should be taken care of. Let the government go and reverse, the fuel subsidy removal, let it reverse the electricity tariff, let it, build infrastructures. And I'm sure that if that is done, then some of the burden that private sector face now can be substantially reduced, and then we can achieve sustainability. Minimum wage, will not cause private sector to become unsustainable or to go down. Workers' wage is their wage. It is, the direct value of their contribution to production to society, and it's their right to ask for.
All right, thank you so much for your time on the news. Hassan Taiwo Soweto, a rights activist and also National Coordinator Education Rights Campaign. Thank you once again.
Yeah, you're welcome.